being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian just wanted to see anyone. Piss off.
That's the one. Because you literally complete me, and we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian. So,
Hey, Manuel Camp was a real pissant. It was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, Dean. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that?
You're insane!
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to CoronaCocktails. It's 4:30 p.m. somewhere, 4:30 p.m. here. And, second day in a row, we're doing the show a little bit later. I hope you are well. I am going to get into a couple of interesting topics today, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you are well. Tell me where you are in the world. Tell me what's going on. Give me a little shout out. I would love to say hi to you, like I'm saying hello to my mom, who is watching very late in South Africa, I might add, 11:30 p.m. at night. You should go to sleep. You should get some beauty sleep, some shut eye. Why don't you? Well, today is National One-Liner Day, National Stand-Up. Or it's not actually National Stand-Up. It's National One-Liner Day. So let's think about some of those one-liners. What is a one-liner? Well, that's one word, Tom. But what are the one-liners that you would want to share? There's many. I mean, there are obviously. Well, first of all, how should you observe National One-Liner Day? Well, the way you should observe National One-Liner Day is as follows, which is celebrate the day by reading over some famous one-liners of film. Perhaps you could watch the clips as well. So what are some of your best one-liners? What are some of the best one-liners in films? I'm going to give you a few. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Clark Gable as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz. Rosebud, Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane. Here's looking at you, kid, Humphrey Bogart. You get the picture, right? Personally, I like, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Actually, that is not a one-liner. What is a one-liner is Bond, James Bond, or Shaken Not Stirred, which we learned yesterday is actually not the way to make the perfect martini. So I'll give a few more while you're racking your brain and thinking about some to add. I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. Al Pacino as Michael Corleone in The Godfather. Here's Johnny. Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance in The Shining. Okay, enough of those one-liners. It's up to you now to determine what some of those one-liners might be. Manif is here from Philadelphia. That is one line, but it's still not what I'm looking for as well. Jan is here with a heart. Jan, I don't know where you've been. I've missed you. You need to tell me what's going on. We were going to send the search party out for you. My mom said now. Again, not the one-liner I was looking. That's what she said. Very good, Bob. I'll have what she's having. That's actually the Tom Morris line now associated with the show. You complete me. Well, Tom, you complete me as well. You've lost your muchness, the Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. I think, therefore, I am. There's so many of them. Just we could keep going for hours, but we won't. But we could if we wanted to. So happy National One-Liner Day. And thank you for celebrating it with me. So just a little bit of an update. Tomorrow, of course, we have a wonderful episode of Corona Community. Melanie Diesel, Angelina Jaspers, Carla Johnson, Peter Rourke, and Scott McCain, as Jan says. That's all, folks, as well. So I'm looking forward to them coming on the show, as I'm looking forward to Adam Ferrier, who is my guest today. He's the chief thinker at Thinkerbell, not Tinkerbell, but Thinkerbell. And so we will welcome him on the show shortly. But first, let's do birthdays out there. Not many people. You know, what I've realized is you can actually, there've been two benefits ultimately of being able to do these birthdays. Actually, I'm sorry, three benefits. One is it really has connected me with some very special people like Jeff Cottrell, just by sending out a birthday, just by saying happy birthday. That simple, innocuous act has brought me together with a very special person who really, I mean, my life is so much richer for him and I having connected just through a birthday. The second is it has really allowed me to purge my Facebook friends, not purge them, but be able to clean them up a little bit. Sometimes it's as simple as someone has two accounts, and so I just, delete or unfriend the one that is the least active. And that's been a second thing as well. But, it's amazing to me how when people are stuck at home or just in need of a little boost, how just something as simple as happy birthday can make the world of difference as well. Tom says, just heard Jan Zlotnick on a podcast. Joseph, you have geniuses in your audience, not me, of course, as if that needed to be said. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. Good goes around, love goes around, and the ability to, come together. We've all been collaborating as a family, and it's just been an absolutely joyous journey and experience, no doubt. Well, let's go back to our birthdays, and we'll do our LinkedIn birthdays as well. Eric Druckenmiller, Rajiv Krishnan, Corey Engelbert. So there's one more interesting learning that has come out of these birthdays. And one is you can really see when parents were making whoopee. I mean, you can really see the days when there were an abundance of babies being born versus a slow news day or a slow birthday. And it seems like January 21st is kind of a slow day. That's okay. I'm not very good at math, so I'm not really in a position to tell you what 9 months ago was, but you can basically do the math and figure it out yourself. So I just thought I would share that and throw that in as well. Well, let's get to our seated soliloquy. And the seated soliloquy today is called Rule Number One. Not the golden rule, but related to the golden rule, Rule Number One. Well, rule number one, of course, is the customer is always right. Rule number two is if the customer is wrong, see rule number one. I think it's safe to say this axiom has outlived its usefulness. It's outdated, inaccurate, and or otherwise incomplete, and has been for a couple of decades now. For starters, it doesn't factor in the internal customer, your employees. And this error of omission can make things pretty unpleasant for a well-intentioned employee dealing with a Karen or many Karens. In the digital age, it's a lot easier to be a lot more unreasonable, and a loud voice does not necessarily attach itself to a voice of truth. Customer service representatives on the receiving end are more often than not neither empowered nor equipped to deal with these confrontations. Then there's the alleged Henry Ford quote. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I said alleged because some people say maybe it wasn't him that said that originally. But the fact remains, customers don't always know what they want or need. Steve Jobs was a master at ignoring his customer, which in part could have been because of his narcissism, reality distortion field, and arrogance, and in part because he and the Apple brand actually did know better. I want to be clear that I'm not advocating turning your back on your customer, but while we're at it, it is one of the heresies that I wrote about in Built to Suck. What if you turned your back on your customer? That's the heresy. What if you fired your customer? What if you charged your customer for admission? Now, from REI closing on Black Friday, sorry, can't come in today, or Costco putting a membership fee on store visits, these heresies are not as far-fetched as you might think. As always, the answer never sits on the extremes. It's never an absolute. It's never an either-or, but rather the art and science of being able to discern when, what times, and how much. When do you push? When do you pull back? More importantly, and we'll talk about this on the show today, there is a world of difference between listening and hearing. And we've actually heard that on the show in listening to and hearing Murray Nossel. At the end of the day, I believe in partnership. And in this case, a perfect union between brand and consumer. It's a two-way street that doesn't have to be about leadership or the relinquishment thereof. And when it works really, really well. I guess that's what they call competitive advantage or differentiation. But when it doesn't work, the booby prize is irrelevance and ultimately obscurity. So rule number 3, when the customer is wrong, ... right? Fill in the blank. I'm not really sure what that rule number 3 is, but maybe it's something for us to think about, for you guys to think about as well, and for us to come up with a better, more evolved solution. Well, I'll tell you one person that absolutely has a point of view on those golden rules and might be able to come up with rule number 3, right? Rule number 1, when the customer, the customer is always right. Rule number 2, when the customer is wrong, see rule number 1. What is rule number 3? Well, one person that does know is my next guest, Adam Ferrier. And I got to tell you something about Adam. I met him a while ago. We can talk about that. He really is the smartest man in the world. Now, how do I know he's the smartest man in the world? Because he told me I could literally say anything in terms of introducing him and making up his bio. So I'm going to tell you that he is the smartest man in the world. And I'm going to actually show you and prove to you that he is the smartest man in the world by showing you this introduction to him.
Is any publicity still good publicity?
Absolutely not. Brand awareness is no longer correlated with business growth. What is positive sentiment.
Great clock designed by behavioural economic principles called Clocky. It's built on wheels. As soon as you press the snooze button, the wheels activate. It rolls off the bedside table and into the corner of a room. If you want to turn the snooze button off a second time, you have to get up and go and press the button. Actions changing attitudes faster than attitude changing actions. And it kind of feels like this is a new way of doing things and a new approach. And it's not the whole answer, but just like experiential and our social media are often part of a solution. I think part of a solution is always going to be wedded in behavioural sciences as we move forwards. A radio station in Sydney came to us and said, if we don't raise $1 million in 3 months, we're going under. And so we developed an idea called Ask Richard. And instead of asking them for the money, we got all of them to ask Richard Branson for $1 million. He donated a big prize pool, got lots of attention, it raised well and truly enough to keep the station afloat. To get an idea that's truly worth interacting with is difficult. The masters of doing this are IKEA. There's a thing called the IKEA effect. The IKEA effect states that if you co-create something, you'll end up valuing it more. Let your consumers do stuff for you. Let them in on it. Give them an idea worth interacting with. Adrian has got a whole lot of gifts for everyone in the audience, and all you have to do to get a gift is play air guitar. So, look at that. He's playing air guitar, and he likes me more because he's interacting with me. Make somebody interact with you or act towards you. They'll change their thoughts and feelings to make sense of that action. We think like water. We take the path of least effort. If I want to use a micro-blogging service, which one do I use? Twitter. Why? Because there's nothing else. We were all brands that help us think less, not more.
He said, let's start. I hate this reel. Well, that's what happens when you don't give me a bio.
I did like being introduced as the smartest man in the world. It's amazing how easy it is to believe anything said of you if you want to.
I mean, I found this out for the very first time when I actually realized that most bios are written actually by the people, as a poor PR person, even worse. You know, I always thought like that it was, you know, that they'd been vetted and, you know, and this had been verified.
And they were real in some way, but it's not. They're all just made up guff.
They're all just made. In fact, mine is still one of the most sought after speakers, thought leaders, and consultants. The only people that are looking for me are the police. But so no one's seeking at the moment. Maybe they're looking for you, but they're not looking for me.
I don't know. Anyway.
So how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm busier than I've ever been, working very efficiently, jumping from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, which is doing my head in, and a level of exhaustion is high. In Australia, there's a kind of a sense of smugness that's kind of permeated through Australia as we've got this coronavirus under control a little bit. But it's been through doing very harsh, very long lockdowns that have exhausted the bejesus out of everyone.
Well, listen, I would prefer to have Australia any day of the year than poor old US. But we're trying to figure it out. All I can tell you is that I've really enjoyed these daily chats with some of my best friends, new friends, old friends. Now, if I'm correct, and you know, now that I'm north of 50. Well, I'm 50. Did we meet at was it Contagious? Was it Contagious in Singapore, or was it through Bircham and TCO?
I reckon we met by having a very big night playing my then newly released board game in the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. And,
yeah, it was Contagious.
With the guys from Anomaly and the people from Contagious and and Ivan Pollard was there, who you need to hit up to be on the show, the CMO of General Mills.
Not only has he been on the show, but we did Monty Python impersonations together.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That's good.
Whatever happened with the board game?
Well, it got translated into a number of different languages. It still sells well in the Benelux countries. It's called Toxtyle over there. It's called The Analyst here, but it's not reprinted. So it still kind of ticks along.
All right. So now one of the things we do on the show is we really get to know the real person. So I just know you as the smartest man in the world. Sorry, Saul Colt, who actually calls himself the smartest man in the world, which just proves your point as well about writing bios. He is a very smart guy and a nice guy. But I think I called you the most brilliant man in the world because I didn't want, copyright infringement. But we know you to be a scientist, a consumer psychologist. But here are maybe some of the things that not everyone knows about you. So we start off with this interesting fact, which is you were the state under-12 chess champion, and apparently could move your neck around like The Exorcist. So you must have watched The Queen's Gambit, right?
I have. I love it. That's some pretty good photoshopping there.
It gets worse. It gets worse. I'm just with full warning. I love the fact, by the way, just in terms of looking at trends in this weird world we live in, that there was a complete run on toilet paper and and disinfectant and sanitizer. But after Queen's Gambit, there was actually for a while a shortage on chess sets or chessboards. And I just love that story because, I was a chess player too, not very good.
And speed clocks as well. Chess clocks boomed as well. And yeah, I love it. I just love the fact that I think it's part of the whole zeitgeist, isn't it, as well, of kind of slowing down, returning back to what's important, what's in front of us. Board game sales in general have been gone through the roof as well. So I think the Queen's Gambit came out at a good time on top of the trend of already about cocooning, slowing down, and just sitting down for a while and concentrating on something.
Well, let's actually talk about that for a second. Go off on a slightly small tangent. Board games, almost as an industry, would have been considered to be defunct or outdated. Difficult to get your kids to, gather around the table and play these antiquated things with dice and pointers when they're glued, not only on their phones but even to the digital version or the mobile version, right? Words with Friends, etc. And now huge comeback during COVID. And I'm thinking out loud here, so I'm not even sure if there's an intelligent point or question. But I wonder if there's something to be said about endurance and the power for a brand just to be able to, hang in there. And, sometimes just everything falls into your lap, whether you're a Zoom or Clorox. One day you just wake up and you're like, ding, ding, just won the jackpot. And other times it seems the world has turned against you if you're in the movie business. So I wonder if there's something to build on there about this idea of staying power.
And it's a nice thought. An entrepreneur once said to me, being early feels a lot like being wrong, because if you're too early before the wave, you don't get it and your business doesn't work. But I do like that idea of having a whole lot of different latent brands and different categories, and then eventually the wave will come up and take you surfing. It's a nice thought. I also I look at Lego now, and I've just recently bought a Lego set for the Star Destroyer. In the Star Wars Star Destroyer in Lego, it's massive, and it was $1,000. And I thought, gee, Lego is doing really well. And it was bloody hard to get as well. And there's another one, the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian, that sold out around the world. Couldn't get it. And that brand must be going through an absolute renaissance at the moment.
I like that example. And just to go back, to Lego as a company and a brand has been able to offer social commentary. I think at one point withdrawing police from its sets for a while, but being able to create a platform, not so much a brand, but a platform that can literally be adapted to anything. So whatever the flavor is, you could technically, I don't think they would sell it, but you could technically build a nice 3-dimensional coronavirus model.
No. You're exactly right, Joseph. Because they own the platform, because they've invented the system, then they can adapt the system to be whatever the system needs to be at that moment in time, moment in culture. And I think brands in general can learn a lot about that. If you can, and even in your own communications, if you can create the platform with the system for the category, and then you can put stuff on top of it. So I've been wrestling with that very thought about how brands can kind of learn from that example.
I've basically now written 2 new consulty buzzwords. I've written brand endurance to continue to think about, and now brand system. I love brand system. Brand system is
brand system's good. So you and I will be on a race to see who can own it.
Well, just we'll just do a little hat tip, the Mutual Admiration Society. Well, here's another fun fact about you. I love it. You're sitting outside. You're having your espresso. Good morning to you. Happy Friday. You're in Sydney, right, or Melbourne?
I'm in Melbourne at the moment.
Where all the real smart thinkers are, apparently. That's what I've heard.
So what did you hear?
No, I said that's where all the smart thinkers are.
Melbourne. Well, I don't know about that, but Melbourne has more foxes in the city than any other city in the world.
So there you go. So here's number 2. Interesting thing about you, my friend. See, I told you the photoshopping gets worse and worse when you realize that you're the only black and white image on the entire one. But your family, this is kind of crazy. Your family all have names beginning with A, like the Kardashians with their K. So, you know, if you don't believe me, you just got to go look at your Facebook page that says father to A and A, husband of A, work in A, which could only be replaced with the words fucking A.
I reckon you can blame Malcolm Gladwell for this, because I think it was a tipping point probably, and he was talking about the fact that if your name begins with A, you get an advantage because you're first in line and so forth. And I can remember it, and that being having a name Adam. I was always first in line for everything. I thought, shit, this is good. And my wife's called Anna, so she had the same advantage. So then we thought we'd pass it on to our kids, and so they're called Asterix and Arturo, and so they too will have the same advantage and grow up to be.
Can we just, by the way, take a moment and just enjoy the fact that the name Asterix, greatest name ever.
It's lovely, isn't it? It comes from astri, which means bright star. So that's why an Asterix looks like a star. And so it's Asterix from the cartoon. But there's not that many around. But yeah, it's lovely. And Arturo, or Art for short, I remember seeing once on a bedroom of a boy called Art, and it was Art is a boy's name. And I loved that. That stayed with me as well. So Art and Asterix it is.
All right. Well, we have not met anyone called Obelix yet, or as I'm an amateur singer, so I've been called Cacophonics at the best of times, which I assume is not a compliment based on. I mean, funnily enough, when I think about it, Cacophonics would have enjoyed being in this COVID-enabled world, because they would have always been put on mute. You know, so the you're on mute Cacophonics would have applied beautifully. But that was number 2. Interesting factoid number 2. The third one, I think, gets to a little bit of you and your profession and your journey, which is, as I told you, from the sublime to the ridiculous. You actually began your work life as a correctional psychologist. So whether we talk about marketing science, whether we talk about being a consumer psychologist, I'm curious. Well, I would love to hear about this experience in your life, but also how it informed the next step and the next stage, and ultimately how you became, I guess, from a correctional psychologist to a consumer psychologist.
At school, I studied. At school, I was failing school, went to see a tutor. The tutor said, "What are your interests?" I said to the tutor or the counselor, "My interests are money and people." And that person said I should become a consumer psychologist. And I thought, oh my God, that is perfect. Didn't know what one was, but I just knew that was what I wanted to do. So I went and studied psychology and commerce, got degrees in both. At the time, the forensic psychology was quite big on TV. And I just got sidetracked for a little bit looking for my first job out of uni, and got a job. I did my thesis in homicide, or my thesis in Ferrier on the impacts of homicide, and so I got a job basically where I could, which is in the prison system, and stayed there for 5 years, and then worked in private practice. The question about how does it inform what I do now, I reckon, is a really interesting one, because at the time and for early years after that, I would have said not at all. But you know how when you have ideas and you create your form how the world works, and you just take bits and pieces of what you've learned and you put them together, and that's all you can do. It's amazing how many pieces of really interesting, really kind of visceral stuff I learned in the prison system about how people behave and could apply them to a different setting. And I guess the example I use of that is interviewing sex offenders, basically, which I used to do over and over and over again for court reports. And you would think that if you're interviewing them for court, that they would try to minimize or hide what they're doing in some particular way. And obviously they did that. But also they've told themselves for years and years and years what they've done is okay. So they've lied to themselves over and over again. So what they sometimes don't realize what they're saying. is actually really inappropriate because they've distorted their cognitions through self-talk for many years. And so they'll say really stupid things to somebody assessing them for court, like it's okay to have sex with dogs or whatever it is that's weird and horrific. And even though you're writing a report for court for them, because they've told themselves that over and over. And that taught me the power of cognitive dissonance a lot, that we're all kind of have to reform our thoughts to make sense of our actions. And that, I'll just try and mute for a sec, as that.
Now that's, it sounds like a bus to me.
That's a cement mixer going past.
Oh, a cement mixer. All right. Well, as long as you're not saying the wrong thing and the cement mixer is coming for you, we're good.
But that taught me about the power. That was just one little data point, and then I got into the whole kind of thing about actions and attitudes and feelings and the interrelationship between them all. But then that was a very powerful point for me to realize that action change attitude far quicker than attitude change actions. So if you can get people to do stuff or interact with your brand, it's what we're in the business of, then they'll change their thoughts and feelings to make sense of that behavior. So I reckon that's a nice little clear example of the kind of stuff I learned. Plus I also learned a whole lot of interesting dinner party stories to freak people out.
No, I mean, maybe you're the most interesting man in the world. Never mind. I will keep on piling on the descriptions. But it's interesting because we get into, the soliloquy about listening versus hearing, and this idea of, which we'll get to, consumer, specifically your point and your point of view on consumer insights. There are so many different places we can go and places we can take that. The idea of cognitive dissonance, and I mean, we're living in it right now in a world where mask wearing is politicized, where certainly the US is as divided and ripped apart as it's ever been. Even last night or the night before, I tried in vain with a post on someone's feed who's just been insanely, I don't know what the word is, warped, conned, fooled, deluded, or maybe I am, who knows. And I just said, it's time for unity and healing and coming together. And I may as well have been talking gibberish. But it was just, it was an impossible bridge to cross. There are none as deaf as those who will not hear. There are none as blind as those who will not see. Selective listening, cognitive bias. You've lived this your whole life, in terms of understanding and studying consumers, in terms of understanding what is a real insight and uncovering that, and then being able to take it to the ultimate biased receiver of it, which is the client. And them looking for only things that reinforce their worldview. So you've written a book, we're going to talk a lot about it, which is called Stop Listening to the Consumer. Try hearing your brand instead. And it got me to think. I just had 1,000 questions suddenly, right? That's why I wrote The Customer is Not Always Right. Why don't we start there and talk about, what is rule number 3, right? If rule number 1 is the customer is always right, rule number 2 is if the customer is wrong, see rule number 1. What is rule number 3? How does that evolve?
Rule number 3 is try hearing your brand instead. So, I like the example you give is Steve Jobs. The other one I use a lot is obviously Richard Branson. There are some people who inherently get what their brand's about and have their power through the narcissism, as you said, or whatever, to be able to disseminate that brand throughout the organization. And that brand, what that brand's about, governs the business success, almost irrespective of the customer. So there's not a customer in the world that asks for inbuilt obsolescence of Apple. There's not a customer in the world that asks for lots of dongles and cords that mix and match and don't make things neat. There's not a customer in the world who asks for obscure payment systems that make it really hard to work out what I'm paying for, what I'm not through Apple. And none of those things are customer driven or there's no customer insight behind any of that shit. It's just them understanding their brand and building a brand ecosystem to mesh people in. And there's quite a few examples of brands that do that. So I'm actually not saying, sorry. And if you do listen to the customer, there's a whole lot of issues with that. So your brand exists in a category, and very few people need your brand. They need your category. So people don't need a Coke, they need a cool drink. People don't need a Volvo, they need a car. And so with the need, when the need's triggered, the need is triggered at a category level, and then your brand fights along a whole lot of other brands to be the brand that's mentally and physically available, and consumers will choose that one, to quote Byron Sharp's language. So if you do listen to the customer, you're much more likely to get category needs than you are to get brand needs. They don't give a shit about your brand. They don't know what your brand stands for. They don't have your brand's best interests at heart. They'll tell you what they want at a category level. And so the more you listen to them, the more it's going to make your brand like everybody else in the category. And so it tends to wipe off the rough edges of a brand, tends to make brand more homogenous. I'm sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant because I'll just get it all out and then we can discuss it all a bit more. But the other thing it does is if you listen, there's not a person in the world who will say, I want to see more advertising from the brand and I want to spend longer on that brand's website when I'm buying stuff. Everyone will say, I want to get in and out, to do things on my own terms. I only want to hear about that brand when I need to. So what customers want, or as somebody once said to me, people just want to be left alone by brands. And that's the very opposite of how brands grow. Brands grow by mental and physical availability. Another word for that, brands grow by being in their face, being in the customer's face, and being near them when they want to buy. And so if you listen to the customer, they'll say, stay away, don't advertise, make your website really easy to get in and out of. But the more sticky you can make your stuff, the more you can stay in customers' minds and have residual memory structures and so forth, give them kind of things to work through, make them put effort into your brand, make them spend time on your website and work through stuff and get a sense of accomplishment, then the more you're going to have a strong brand in their mind. So it devalues your brand, it makes your brand more homogenous, and we all know what customers say is wrong anyway. So don't listen to them, listen to your brand instead.
So we're going to get to what it is to hear or listen to a brand versus the customer, but we always do on the show a quote, and it's kind of guess who said this. And my goal is to try and bring that in at the right time. So this is your quote. If your business proposition is innovative, your ultimate goal has to be the customer always thinks we are right. So this might be three. It might be 3A or 3B.
If your business proposition is
if your business proposition is innovative, your ultimate goal has to be the customer always thinks we are right. So rather, it's an interesting flip, right? Because it's not about the customer being right or wrong. It is about brand leadership and the customer viewing the brand point of view or the brand, as credible, as authentic and quite frankly correct. But who do you think said that?
Steve Jobs.
So I was prepared to trick you. And at first I thought I would go with Steve Jobs, but in the end I played right into your hand, and that actually is Richard Branson.
Great.
Isn't that interesting? That it's
Unreal. Yeah, great. It's exactly right. And I'm stoked with that, mate. I'm going to be ripping that off and using it. And this is going to sound Machiavellian and evil, but they have to believe it's in their best interest at some level. And to do that, you cannot just say, fuck it, we're going to do exactly what we want to do, irrespective of what the customer wants. It's just that I feel like in society at the moment, in marketing society, business society, there's this lip service and there's this thing about customer obsession and putting the customer at the heart of a business and all this. And it's really empty rhetoric. And I reckon if you did put the customer at the heart of your business and do what's right for the customer, 70% of businesses wouldn't exist. Like, we don't need another flavored water. We don't need another cereal. You know what I mean? So stop pretending you've got the customer's interest at the core of a business. You've got your business at the core of your business, or your brand at the core of your business, and then you go from there. But yeah, I like that quote.
And so, but it's hard. I mean, how many clients are there out there? How many brands are there out there that actually have the self-confidence, the identity, the spine?
So Joseph, I reckon it used to be quite a lot, but I think as we get more and more data, and we get more and more ways of listening to the customer, and we get more and more inputs into what they want, it takes our eye off brand positioning and in brand engagement and making sure we disseminate the brand internally and all that kind of stuff. When I started in business, when I started in marketing, I always used to get given the brand positioning as part of the brief. I worked at, Saatchi. We never get given the brand positioning as part of the brief anymore because it often doesn't exist. And they say to us, and we also need to rework our brand positioning because we're not quite sure what it is. And so it feels like the fundamentals of marketing, of understanding what a brand stands for, make sure it's enduring, differentiating, motivating, credible, all that stuff. That skill set, that high strategic skill set, has been usurped by customer bloody journeys and human-centered design and app development.
So, I mean, it's like I gotta go a little bit deeper in terms of the positioning and the purpose, because it's a work in progress, right? Everyone is there is an acute lack of identity right now, and lack of belief, self-belief, right? I think it comes down to how many people in this world are going to stand firm on terra firma and say, screw it, this is, I'm putting my stake in the ground, and come hell or high water, I'm not going to be moved, so to speak. It just doesn't apply anymore. So what happens right now is that it is just going with the wind. It's bending and breaking, no matter where consumer sentiment is, where blogger sentiment is, where influencer sentiment is, where woke sentiment is. It's a challenge, because I mean, I think it comes down to that quote from Hamilton. If you don't stand for something, what will you fall for? And
we all wonder why Donald Trump was so popular. I don't think he's listened to a lot of focus groups. I think he's got a vision, and I think he's got a view of the world, and I think he's got a lot of self-belief, and I think they're very admirable qualities. And I think he's an evil, hideous, gauche, gross person, but I think he's got a lot of positive qualities we could all learn from. I wanted to, there's a really good creative here in Australia called Nobby, and for years he and I try to shop around a documentary called The Focus Group, and the focus group being the evilness that stops amazing, beautiful things happening. So architects now use focus groups, politicians now use focus groups, advertising, marketing obviously uses focus groups, entertainment uses focus groups. When I say focus group, I kind of mean it as a metaphor for any type of customer research. But it's stopping visionaries having a vision and sticking to it, because the weight of evidence that you have to do this or customize your view and so gets distorted so easily and so quickly by so many different data points now. It's hard to have that clarity of thought and just carry that through without having to appeal to them, appeal to this, appeal to that.
I want to go back to brand Trump for a moment, just for a moment, because it got him so far, and then there was a point when it was just too much. And I was discussing it with Sally Hogshead the other day.
That didn't take long, though, did it? Before it got too much, don't it? Like,
well, I don't know if that's true, because I would have thought, and I would have thunk, I don't know which one is correct. I would have Thinkerbelled that up until January 5th, he would still have been able to withdraw, retreat even with his tail between his legs, even not attending the inauguration, and still being able to rebound with at least a plan B or a second act or second coming of. And now I think I have to believe that the brand is really, really tarnished. But my point is, it's less about, I mean, I'm always interested in what you have to say about anything, but it's about this idea of, as I said in my soliloquy, when do you push, when do you pull back? When is it art? When is it science? For me, it's always been a balancing act. I wouldn't necessarily throw out all consumer journeys. But at the end of the day, I've always believed that if you can, I have different points of view. You know me. I don't believe a consumer journey is linear, and I don't believe it's a one size fits all. And I do think there's some advantages sometimes of understanding magic moments of truth versus disconnect, etc. But the real question is the tail wagging the dog? Who's leading whom? And I think your point of view, and I think your point of view is, it's time for brands to stand up and realize if they want to endure, they're going to actually have to learn how to, fucking lead.
That's right. And it's obviously not, the title of a book is obviously not Stop Listening. The title of a book and the first few chapters of the book talk about how, what we do and what they want. Marrying those two has always been about what marketing is about. But at the moment, what we do has been completely diminished in terms of what they want. And what I'm just saying is, stop listening to them for a while. Start thinking about what we do, what we are, who we stand for, and just redress the balance a little bit. And that's what I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of speaking at conferences and stuff like that. And they always say, "What are your values?" Customer obsession. Customer. Oh, we're obsessed about the customer. Oh, we want to put the customer at the heart of business. I hear it all the time. And we actually did some research. We said, if you had $1 million or 1 million resource points, what would you do? Would you invest in understanding what your brand's about, or would you invest in understanding the consumer? And like 70, 80% or more was all about, I'd use that to understand the customer more. People didn't say I'd use that to understand what my brand's about or disseminate my brand. It was all about focusing externally, focusing out there.
So I wanted, there are a couple of comments that I wanted to just go to. By the way, Bob says the highest compliment is, I'm going to rip this off and use it. Congratulations. But then Tom followed up by saying, I'm going to rip off Bob Farnham's comment about what is the highest compliment and use that. So, this is what happens when the peanut gallery gets too excited. But Tom actually asked this question, and Tom is a philosopher. You'll meet him in the after show. So philosopher meets psychologist. And he says, how does not listening to the customer work together with the IKEA effect?
Probably, it's almost Dorothy Dixon, so thank you for that. Again, there's not a customer in the world that says, if I want a bookcase, I want to travel for an hour to a store, walk right around the store to a really, 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 really long maze, buy the bookcase, take it home. I want to build it myself, and there I'll have a lovely bookcase. That's not customer-centric thinking. If you ask the customer what they want, they'll be able to say, I want to look at it online, have it delivered, and put it standing there. The IKEA effect is a subsection of an overall body of work in psychology called the effort paradox. The effort paradox basically says the more effort we put into anything, the more we value it. If you've had kids are not great to hang out with. As kids are not cool housemates. They demand a shitload of attention. You have to wipe their bum. You have to feed them. They scream. They yell. They're really real pains in the ass. We put so much effort into making them happy that we end up loving it. And it's the same for a mother doing 9 months of looking after the thing in the stomach and all that stuff. So the effort paradox: the more effort you put into something, the more you value it. IKEA know that really well. IKEA's challenge is now is going to have to be, as they move forwards, they're going to have waves of customer research saying, make it easier for me to buy your stuff. And they're going to have to weigh up that versus the value of the brand, which is in this whole concept of co-creation and effort.
That's so interesting, and I'm glad he asked the question, and I think I think we can maybe just unpack one more layer, which is pun not intended, or maybe intended. But I wonder what you probably you've probably worked with IKEA and certainly studied them. What was the spark, the catalyst, the first step that got rid of that incumbency thinking, that inertia, to bravely or boldly put forward this value proposition of, the effort paradox probably didn't exist at the time, or at least I don't know if they built that into their initial deck. But there's bravery, there's courage, or there's what is it? What is the secret ingredient, the 11 herbs and spices that allows an IKEA to burst steam?
I've been waiting for that. I've been waiting for that thought to be put into my head to challenge it, because I don't think that thought was inherent in the very first thing they did. I think they just wanted to find a way to get nicely designed furniture to the masses, and I think they probably thought it'd be flat packet, we'd save on shipping costs, so we get people to build it themselves, then we can save on money, and then they can have that nice bookcase as well. I reckon that was probably the starting point for the business. But I think maybe, it's a bit like Lego as well. Their starting point for the business was not to create that system. They used to have all sorts of different types of products, like dolls and plastic wooden toys and stuff like that. But they realised later the value was in the system. I think at some stage they probably realised there's value in making people put a bit of work into getting an IKEA product and having a very long loop, making them walk past all of our products, giving them, if they want to write anything down, don't have staff, give them pencils and let them play with it, interact with it, measure things as they walk through, write things down. All of that is getting you to act towards the brand and purchase. But it's an interesting thought. It probably wasn't there at the very genesis of the business.
And maybe it's best reconciled with with the saying, which is culture eats strategy. As the argument goes, right? Any day of the week. I personally am a strategy guy, but it's an interesting. There's an interesting tension between the overthinking and the ability to create too much structure and process versus just do it. I'd like you to maybe just in the time we have left, give us another example, maybe a lesser known example of a brand that has done a great job at listening to itself versus blindly following the consumer, and then maybe the opposite, which is a brand that has become so enslaved to their consumer and so submissive to their consumer that they've completely lost the plot and that leadership opportunity or role in the market.
In Australia, we have a sport here called cricket, which I'm sure many of your listeners will be aware of. Yeah, and the pinnacle of the game goes for 5 days. It's called Test cricket. It's a 5-day match, and about a third of these 5-day matches end in a draw. And so you watch your sport for 5 days and it ends in a draw. Every year since I've been a kid, they've talked about shortening the length of a game. Hang on, another cement truck.
Yeah, so while the cement truck is going by, what has happened is you had the 1-day game, and now they have what's called T20. So 120 balls per inning. Each team faces a maximum of 120 balls, as opposed to 300 balls, which is the 1-day game, as opposed to the test match, where it could be an indefinite, unlimited number of balls.
Well, yes, within 5 days, that's right. And so they've spoken about shortening the game for years and years and years. And then what they've done is they've created other brands. So they've created 1-day cricket, which is a shorter version. They've created T20, which is an even shorter version. And they've left Test cricket alone. What they've seen is the attendances and the viewership and the money rights and all that for Test cricket during that time going like that. And now so to have a revival with the other brands that are giving the shorter option, it's gone massive. And so and it's gone really, really high. So they've just left it alone. And I just love the fact that they've left Test cricket alone. They've tried to find other ways to solve the problem by introducing these other types of cricket, as you say. And now Test cricket is really, really so it's countercultural, right? To have a 5-day sport where a third of the game's in the draw, and it's stronger than it's ever been, and the cricket is outstanding. So I reckon that's a really good example that they kind of keep on fending off the customer insights and the research to say it's too long, too boring, whatever. An example of a brand that's just been ripped apart in Australia, and I assume it's the same in America as well. The more established the category, the more homogenous the brands become. So if you go onto a website of your main grocery stores, they'll be exactly the same format. If you look at your financial institutions, they'll be the same. So our big four banks in Australia, Westpac, Commonwealth Bank, St George, and ANZ, they're all exactly the same. They don't differ in their proposition at all. They differ in their colour. So they've all become homogenised to the point where there is really no difference whatsoever between any of them. The only difference is the colour they represent. And this is where Byron Sharp and his book, How Brands Grow, and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute talk about the value of having distinctive assets. So if you can't be differentiated, if you can't stand for something, at least be distinctive. At least have a colour, have a logo that people recognise. And I think that's the end result of almost giving up on brand positioning.
I think that's a great example, because it also comes back to the idea of you buy the category, right, not the actual brand, and that's a double whammy, right? That's your complete catch-22 when banks, airlines, and they all follow each other. It's the ultimate lemming effect. And what of course it does do is it opens up the entire category for all of them to go down with the ship and be disrupted by the startup or the upstart or the Inspiration Bank or Ally or a bank that comes along and says, you know what, you pay us what you think you should pay in terms of fees. So I think that's a great example. Adam, we have a couple minutes left. One of the things that I like to do on the show is ask a Corona question. Normally I tell people in advance, so you're completely being put on the spot now. But your Corona question is just a very lighthearted one, which is, who would play you in a movie?
It's easy. Gerard Depardieu.
Gerard Depardieu. So I took a stab at it in advance.
I think I know who you're going to say. You're going to say Jeff Bridges.
No, I said Jeff Bridges yesterday for Jason Falls. I decided, in keeping and trying to be on brand, I came up with Russell Brand. How about that?
Well, my wife would she would be very excited by that. If only she would love that. And in fact, I might even just screenshot this right now.
Good. I will give you the opportunity to screenshot it as well.
It's very flattering of you.
And it's on brand, I suppose. We have just a few more moments. It's been really awesome catching up with you from the board game that brought us together, to discussing board games, from the commoditization of brands to the differentiation of Russell Brand, to cement trucks. We even had Tom says concrete thinking in progress. Just a little bit of cement truck humor. Hades says great show, and Tom adds good casting answer as well. It's been fun catching up. I've been a huge fan of you and yours over the years.
Likewise, Joseph.
Thank you. No, I do not. I'm undeserving of that compliment.
Seriously.
But I will tell you, from those days at Naked, I seem to remember the office in Australia had a giant chair on the roof, a red velvet chair. I think maybe I dreamt it. But you've really, I think your career has been the embodiment of what your book is about, which is that brand confidence. And instead of looking at what everyone else is doing, being able to grow and differentiate and lead from within. So I just have one more question for you, which is, where's it all heading? Maybe we can take that into the after show, but just give us maybe a little teaser. And I don't care about anyone else than what you think. Where's it all heading? What is, based on the way the world has changed in more ways than we could ever imagine, where do you see what's coming next from your point of view?
My point of view is I just look at all the great science fiction writers of the world, and whenever they portray the future, they portray us all being homogenized, wearing spandex, walking in unison, all with a similar haircut with our pants pulled up high. And I just feel like they were onto something. They knew that there's lots of conforming pressure on everybody, brands, individuals, whatever. You look at something like Wall-E, the cartoon, the cartoon, which is, or just any Gallagher, anything. And that's what I really freak out about. I freak out about this kind of self-policing, the fact that we're all big brother, we're all policing each other's thoughts, and we're all homogenizing each other and chipping off the rough edges of each other. And I think strong brands, strong people, strong identities will have the ability to be able to cut through that. And I reckon, and I also love extremists. I love extremists on both sides. I love extremists on the right, the left, up, down, whatever, because I feel like they're fighting for all of us. I feel like the more extreme the playing field, the more room there is for everybody to have an opinion. You chop off the extremes and we just have a smaller playing field to express ourselves in. And I feel like it's a losing battle. I feel like we're shrinking. That's kind of a reason why I said a part of me really admires Donald Trump, even though I detest him, because I think we need that kind of conversation, but we don't need the hideousness and the death and anger and all that stuff that comes with it. But I do like in the extremes.
And by the way, what it does do is, as a blessing or a curse, well, actually not even as a curse, but as a blessing, what it does do is it awakens that it is an awakening. Which
more, 80 million people voted for one side, 74 million voted for the other in America, the highest turnout rates ever by a country mile. It stirred people's up. It made me think, shit, this is important to me.
Yeah, well, I was going to say what it's also done is sometimes in life, you are attracted to the things that you want to do, or you are repelled by that which you don't want to do. They both can be on extremes, equally powerful. So I think that's a great thought. Final question, because I know actually you won't be able to stay for the after show. So anyone wants to come to the after show, you'll just be hanging out with me. But just tell us about Thinkerbell, not Tinkerbell, but Thinkerbell, because I'm always interested in everything that you're working on. And so obviously the company is one to watch.
Thank you, mate. A very quick plug. Thinkerbell, our proposition is measured magic, which is shorthand for marketing sciences meets hardcore creativity. And it's an agency that I set up with a few friends. And we operate around the world, but have offices in Australia. The business is doing well. It got voted like agency of the year, or second agency, or third agency, depending on what show you went. What awards thing. Does everything from brand strategy to CX and stuff in between. But anyway, yeah, the agency's going really well. We also have an events company called Space, where ideas meet influence. A social cause company called DOA, which stands for Decade of Action. It's also a head nod to the fact that there's no business model on a dead planet. That's why it's called DOA. And we have a market research arm called Hocus Focus, which just aims to be a little less shit than all other market research companies.
As I said in Built to Suck, I said the key to success is to suck less. At least that's the starting point. You most certainly did not suck, and as Chuck Norris would endorse,
You are Chuck Norris approved.
Oh, wow! You got him to do that. Thank you.
I mean, is
You've
there
been waiting there that whole time to do that?
This is high budget from the retouching to Chuck Norris. I'm going to let you go. Stay in touch. It was awesome catching up.
God bless, mate. Good on you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.